Welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. We turn our attention now to football. Ecuador's place at the FIFA World Cup in Qatar is in jeopardy. This amid new claims about the eligibility of one of the players that helped them qualify from CONMEBOL. Now, defender Byron Castillo is accused of falsifying his birth documents and of never holding citizenship of the South American country. Castillo made 8 appearances in Ecuador's qualifying campaign. Questions about his true nationality were raised by the Chilean Football Association. The Chilean FA says Castillo was born in Tumaco, Colombia in 1995. They say he was not, as he claims, born in the Ecuadorian city of General Villamil Playas in 1998. Now the Chileans say the Chilean soccer is clear that a serious offense has been committed by the player, Byron Castillo. We have no doubt, with the documentation we have in hand, that he is Colombian. We have a narrative that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I'm sure that FIFA has knowledge and the need to speed up this very quickly. For this week, we expect a demonstration. The Civil Registry of Ecuador declares in a legal ruling, which we have and that we sent to FIFA, that Castillo's departure certificate does not exist. And if it doesn't exist, it's fake. Joining us to discuss this story is Latin American football expert Juan G. Arango. Juan is a correspondent for the Barcelona-based Diario Sport. Juan, what do you make of this story? Pretty shocking, coming just months before the Qatar World Cup, isn't it?
Well, it's just yet another episode in the life of Byron Castillo. I mean, it's not the only legal thing that he's going through right now. He currently also has an alimony case now, which that might end up not allowing him to go to the World Cup. Not talking about Ecuador qualifying themselves, but have to wait to see what happens as far as Chile's appeal. They still have that pending with the Court of Arbitration in Sport. So that's one of the big question marks that's up in the air. Will that end up being reverted based on what FIFA has already decided? Right now, the answer would end up being no, because based on what the Ecuadorian government has done in the past, and obviously for a player to play for the national team, they have to be a citizen, and the controls, as flimsy and as questionable as they've been in the past when it comes to Ecuadorian football, well, they've been made. So that's the one thing that they have going against them yet again. The only thing that the Chilean FA has done has changed the theater of combat, if you want to put it from that perspective. Now they're talking about a fraud case more than anything else instead of what they were talking about originally.
Yeah, so FIFA obviously can't ignore this because the Chileans are pretty serious about it, but it comes at an awkward time. Ecuador have already been slotted in and they've been placed in a group, and all the arrangements are being placed in for Ecuador to take part in Qatar. How much of a dislocation would it be for FIFA, as the world governing body for the sport, to eject them at this stage?
It would be another embarrassment, because the one thing that we left out of this conversation so far is that Ecuador happens to be the team that was rescheduled when FIFA ended up changing the start date of the World Cup to November 20th. They played Qatar in the very first match of the World Cup. So the timeline ends up being less than anticipated. And keeping in mind how courts do move, well, they're not going to speed up just because of this. And that ends up being one of the biggest causes. I mean, like I said before, they've changed the theater of combat, if you will. They've changed it now, saying that he committed fraud in another country at this point. So how do you prove that? You have to come in with a brand new case, and not only with the birth certificate issue, but also, okay, how did he commit fraud in terms of defrauding a country, in terms of being able to bring in a false citizenship? So how do you do that? How do you start to press that when the country that's being questioned has already said that, look, he's a legal citizen?
Yes, and one, of course, based on the narrative that Chile is pushing, obviously there's something in it for them. Talk to us now. If Ecuador is out, who will be in, how will the table look, and whatnot?
In terms of the group?
Who makes it for the World Cup? So Chile gets an in.
Chile would technically get in, because the reason why Chile is questioning this is because in the 2 matches that Ecuador played against them, Byron Castillo played.
Right.
At first, when this story first came out, they were talking, well, Colombia's going to get him out. Well, Colombia finds out Byron Castillo didn't play in any of those matches, so it doesn't end up impacting them in any way, shape, or form. Does it help Peru? maybe. But right now, the team that would end up being favored the most would be Chile.
Yeah, and based on how things are looking, which side are you leaning on? Do you see Ecuador being kicked out of the World Cup, or do you think that, they have all their checks and balances in place and, Chile just pushing a narrative to see how far they can get?
Well, I think I agree with you as far as, I'll start backwards since we're going in that direction. I would agree with what you just said in terms of the narrative they're trying to build again, and a new narrative that they're trying to build. This has already been talked about. This has already been decided upon. This is already waiting for an appeal. So on top of the appeal, you have to wait for that. And then afterwards, you have to come in and see how this case is going to work out. So you don't have much of a timeline to be able to work with. And now that you're pushing something brand new, who knows if FIFA's just going to be angry and say, no. I mean, it's going to be complicated. It's a very complex situation. But it's also something that Chile has always been notorious for. You have to remember last World Cup cycle that there was an issue with Bolivia as well. So Chile pushed that narrative. They ended up not qualifying, as we well know. But then the team that ends up getting benefited happens to be Peru, because they end up getting enough points to be able to get into World Cup qualifying, into the World Cup qualifying playoff against New Zealand, thus ending up in that playoff, and then of course ending up in Russia. So Chile has always been, especially during the last few years, notorious for trying to find whatever little crevice, whatever little legal loophole they can find to be able to get into a World Cup, and it's been at the expense of their lack of performance on it.
Yeah, and Juan, I'm pretty certain that given Chile's aging roster, yourself and I guess most football fans would actually prefer to see Ecuador in Qatar, wouldn't they?
Right now, it's just the project that's working better. It's just a project that was built. I mean, if you put them on even keel at the beginning of this World Cup qualifying cycle, you would probably have said Chile was a little bit ahead of them. But what Gustavo Alfaro has been able to do, taking over the beginning of this project when Jordi Cruyff comes in the middle of the pandemic, doesn't have one practice with the national team, ends up leaving after 7 months. Gustavo Alfaro comes in and brings in a good generation of players, many of those that played in the Under-20 World Cup back in 2019 and got to the semis. And you see a lot of players that have moved on. I mean, one of the biggest examples is looking at Leo Campana and what he's been able to do over at Inter Miami. And also you start seeing Moises Caicedo and how he's begun the season with Brighton. Those two are basically bedrocks of the midfield, bedrocks in the attack in terms of Ecuador. And seeing those young players come through, you start to see a better project, at least in the medium term, compared to Chile and what they're looking to have right now with an Arturo Vidal, with an Alexis Sanchez team, players that have won two Copa Americas, but that was over 7 years ago.
Yeah, this is not a story, though, that we expect to be floating around for too long. Juan, FIFA will have to make a call pretty soon, and you don't expect this to be in limbo for very much longer, because, we're pretty much on the doorstep of the World Cup.
Yeah, no, whatever decisions have to be made, they have to be made quickly. And whatever resources have to be used, they have to be put into action quickly as well. Maybe not to the liking of FIFA, especially after all the moving and all the changing and all the logistics, and on top of making Ecuadorian fans angry because now they have to change their plans completely, having to come a day earlier to see their team. Now they're going to have to deal with this. It just leads to a very volatile situation if they do decide to take Ecuador out now.
Yeah, and we have to say that if this had been previous World Cup tournaments, this would have been a dead issue, because the World Cup would be on already this summer, and pretty unorthodox for a World Cup to be staged so late in the year.
Yeah, no, you're right. It does that, but then also Chile was well aware of the situation, and thus they're using this timeline, although it's very limited at this point. They know that they still have something, and again, right now they're just reaching and trying to grab at anything. It's just a straw man argument right now.
Let's shift forward, though, and move away from that in itself a topic. But who are your World Cup winners for November, Juan?
Ooh, man. It's so difficult to see it at this point. You have to see France in how Kylian Mbappe is coming into camp.
Yeah.
When you see Benzema coming in, one thing is so far what he's been able to do with Real Madrid.
You know it isn't easy for teams to repeat as World Cup champions.
It's not only just to repeat, it's to get out of the group stage recently. So,
but you're so right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another thing. And France usually after having a good World Cup, the following World Cup ends up being basically a media circus. So right now we're in the cycle where it can be a media circus, especially with what Mbappe's been able to do and what he's gone through in the early stages of this season with PSG.
Yeah.
Brazil looks solid. Argentina, Spain looks good. It just looks very even. So I would pick Argentina, Spain, Brazil, between those three.
What about my Germans?
Argentina, Spain, and Brazil for
Hard one.
and I'll probably throw England in there as well.
All right, we'll have a lot of time to talk about that one. Thanks for linking with us.
No problem.
Great. So as we said, FIFA is expected to make a ruling on this, George and Mariah, pretty soon, because this is a story at the moment that could be pretty embarrassing for world football, and FIFA would want to get it out of the way as quickly as possible.
And the teams need to train. They need to clear their mindset. We need to know who's in.
Yeah.
We're out of time.
Break time. Back in a moment.